The resume on his screen was flawless, polished, professional, and radiating the quiet confidence of someone who had never been told no in a meaningful way. It belonged to Isabella Rossi, and for a moment, Alex felt the phantom chill of a memory 2 years old. He sat in his office, a minimalist expanse of glass and steel on the 57th floor, the city of Chicago sprawling beneath him like a circuit board of infinite possibility. From this height, the world looked orderly, logical, a place where cause and effect were as clear as the lines of the skyscrapers. Down there, in the chaos of life, things were messier. His assistant, Sarah, stood by his desk, holding a tablet with the same information. She was a master of professional calm, but he could see the slight tension in her posture. She knew who Isabella Rossi was, not the details, not the ugly words spoken over a Christmas dinner, but she knew the name and its connection to his past. Her qualifications are exceptional, Sarah said, her voice even. She passed the first and second round interviews with the highest scores in the pool. Jacob in strategic outreach is convinced she's the one. Alex looked at the name again. Isabella Rossi, his wife, his estranged wife. The woman who had, with the casual cruelty of the truly privileged, declared him replaceable. And now, by a twist of fate so sharp it could draw blood, she was applying for a senior director position at his company. His company. The one he had built from nothing, from the ashes of the man she had so casually dismissed. The irony was so thick he could taste it, metallic and bitter like old regret. He thought they didn't know. Isabella, her arrogant father, her smirking brother. They thought he was a failure, a mid-level architect who couldn't handle the pressure of their world, who had run away to lick his wounds in some dingy apartment while tinkering on a passion project. They had no idea that the passion project, Ethelred Structures, had become this. A silent giant in the architectural technology space, the very company that was now, indirectly, swallowing her father's failing empire whole. Within a week, she would walk into this building for her final interview, confident and assured, and the world she thought she knew would be unmade. Before we go any further into this story of quiet reckonings, I have to ask, where are you all watching from? It's a constant source of wonder to me how these stories can bridge oceans and continents, connecting us all, from Manila to Manchester, from Rio to Rome. Let me know in the comments below, and if you believe that true strength isn't always the loudest voice in the room, if you appreciate stories about patience, integrity, and eventual, satisfying vindication, you're in the right place. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because you truly will not want to miss how this ends. Alex leaned back in his chair, the expensive leather sighing softly. He looked from the resume to Sarah's expectant face. For a fleeting second, he considered telling her to simply discard the application. It would be easy. A quiet click of a button and Isabella Rossi would receive a polite automated rejection. She would never know how close she had come to the truth. She would move on, her perception of him as a forgotten, minor character in her life's grand drama left perfectly intact. But that wasn't justice. Justice, he had learned, wasn't about silent removal. It was about clarity. It was about holding up a mirror, not a weapon. "No, you're right, Sarah," he said, his voice calm and measured. "Her qualifications are indeed exceptional. Please proceed with the standard process." He paused, looking out the window for a long moment before turning back to her. "Schedule the final interview for next Friday. I'll handle it personally." Sarah's expression didn't change, but he saw a flicker of understanding in her eyes. She was more than an assistant. She was his first employee, the one who had believed in his vision when Ethelred Structures was just a blueprint in a worn leather notebook and a server humming in his tiny apartment. She knew the weight this interview would carry. "Of course, Alex," she said. She gave a single, respectful nod and walked out, leaving him alone with the ghost of Christmas past and the promise of a future confrontation. He swiveled his chair to face the window again, the city, lights beginning to glitter as dusk settled in. The quiet before the storm. He had waited 2 years for this. He could wait 1 more week. 2 years and 4 months earlier, the air in her parents' home had been thick with the scent of pine needles and roasting turkey, suffocating him with a festive cheer he could not share. The house was a monument to her father's success. It wasn't a home, it was a statement. Each piece of art was an investment, each piece of furniture a declaration of status. Marcus Rossi moved through these rooms not like a homeowner, but like a king surveying his domain. Alex, a mid-level architect at a firm respected for its artistry, but not its aggression, felt like a foreign dignitary from a much smaller, poorer nation. The humiliation had begun subtly, as it always did. It was an exercise in exclusion. Marcus, Isabella's father, and Julian, her brother, stood by the massive stone fireplace, tumblers of scotch in hand, discussing the kind of brutal corporate warfare that made Alex's stomach turn. They spoke of hostile takeovers, of trimming the fat from acquired companies, a euphemism for firing hundreds of people before Christmas, and of leveraging debt in ways that seemed less like business and more like high-stakes gambling. They never once looked at Alex or tried to include him. He was a piece of furniture, a silent accessory his wife had brought along for the holiday. He was present, but he was not involved. Isabella saw his discomfort, but she misinterpreted it. She saw it not as a moral objection to the conversation, but as the insecurity of a man who couldn't compete. Later, as they sat around the sprawling mahogany dining table, she brought her frustration to the surface. It started with a simple question from her father. "So, Alex," Marcus had said, his tone dripping with condescension as he carved the turkey with surgical precision. "Still designing those quaint little community centers?" "We just won a contract for the new city library," Alex had replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "It's a challenging project, a beautiful design that integrates green space into the urban core." Julian had snorted into his wineglass. "Libraries, very noble. Don't make much money though, do they? Not like our new commercial real estate division. We're projecting 9-figure revenues next year." "Money isn't the only measure of success, Julian," Alex said quietly. That was the opening Isabella had been waiting for. All evening, she had been shooting him looks of disappointment. He was not performing. He was not impressing her family. He was not validating her choice to marry him. "Oh, don't be so naive, Alex," she'd snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut through the clatter of silverware. "Of course it is. It's the only measure that matters in the real world. Ambition, growth, power. That's what drives things forward." "I am ambitious," Alex countered, his voice still low. "My ambition is to create meaningful spaces that improve people's lives. I'm content with my work." The word content landed on the table like a declaration of war. To the Rossi family, contentment was a disease. It was the antithesis of everything they believed in. Isabella had looked at him then, her eyes cold with a disappointment that felt ancient. "Contentment is for the unambitious, Alex," she said, her voice clear and carrying across the table for all her family to hear. The smirks on her father's and brother's faces told him they were enjoying the show. It's a fancy word for settling. In this world, in our world, she gestured around the opulent room. You have to be indispensable. You have to be the person they can't afford to lose. And right now, she paused, letting the silence stretch, letting every eye at the table fall upon him. You're replaceable. The word hung in the air. Replaceable. It was not shouted. It was delivered with the calm, cutting precision of an executioner's blade. It was a final, damning judgment of his worth, his career, his very being. In that moment, he was not her husband. He was a failed investment, a line item on her life's balance sheet that was underperforming. He didn't fight back. He didn't raise his voice or defend himself. The insult was so profound, so fundamental, that to argue would be to validate its premise. He simply looked at her, a deep, quiet sorrow settling in his chest. He felt the familiar shape of the small, leather-bound notebook in the inner pocket of his jacket. His fingers brushed against it, a secret talisman. Inside were not just architectural sketches, but algorithms, business models, the first whispers of a different future. A future they couldn't see, couldn't comprehend. He absorbed the blow, the humiliation, the pitying looks from her family. He let it all wash over him, because in their blindness, they had given him the one thing he needed most, a reason to stop being content, not for them, but for himself. The drive home from that Christmas dinner was a silent one. The space between Alex and Isabella in the car felt vast, a cold, unbridgeable canyon. She was vibrating with a self-righteous anger, furious that he had not only failed to impress her family, but had embarrassed her with his lack of fight. He was quiet, but it was not the quiet of defeat. It was the quiet of calculation. The word replaceable was no longer an echo of an insult. It had become a mantra, a single crystalline point of focus. It had severed the last thread of hope he had for their marriage. But in doing so, it had also set him free. In the weeks that followed, the chasm between them became a permanent fixture of their home. They were roommates sharing a mortgage, two celestial bodies whose orbits had decayed until they were spinning in opposite directions. Isabella saw his withdrawal as proof of his weakness, a pouting retreat from the truth she had so generously bestowed upon him. She couldn't see the tectonic shift happening beneath the surface of his calm demeanor. He wasn't retreating. He was reallocating his energy. He had always possessed a quiet, analytical mind that saw the world in terms of systems and structures. It was what made him a good architect. But for years, he had kept one part of his intellect cordoned off as a hobby. It was a piece of software he'd been developing in his spare time, a sophisticated program designed to streamline project management for large-scale architectural and construction projects. It used predictive algorithms to manage resources, anticipate supply chain disruptions, and optimize labor allocation. He called it Ethelred, a nod to an old English king known more for his counsel than for his crown, a name that spoke of quiet, structural wisdom. He'd shown it to Isabella once, a year prior, his eyes alight with passion. She had glanced at the screen for a few seconds, her eyes glazing over at the lines of code and complex diagrams, and said, "That's nice, honey," before changing the subject to a gallery opening she wanted to attend. Now, Ethelred was no longer a hobby. It was his arc. Every night after Isabella went to bed in a cloud of expensive moisturizer and quiet resentment, Alex would retreat to his small study. He would open his laptop and the worn leather notebook that held the core concepts, and he would work. He poured all the frustration, all the humiliation, all the quiet sorrow of his failing marriage into lines of code. He was not just building a program, he was building an escape. He was architecting a new life, one where the rules were his own, where worth was measured not by volume, but by value, not by appearance, but by function. 3 months after that Christmas, he made his move. He used the entirety of a small inheritance his grandmother had left him, a sum he had carefully invested and grown over the years. It was more than Isabella knew he had, a quiet testament to a financial acumen she never thought to ask about. He hired a small team, a brilliant young coder he knew from a university forum, and a seasoned logistics expert looking for a new challenge. He rented a small, unglamorous office space in a less fashionable part of the city. The day he told Isabella he was leaving was anticlimactic. He sat her down in their perfectly decorated living room, a space she had designed to be featured in a magazine, and calmly explained that he was moving out. He told her he was starting his own business, a small consulting firm based on his software. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She looked at him with a weary, pitying expression, as if he were a child announcing his intention to run away and join the circus. "A consulting firm?" she repeated, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "Based on your little computer project?" "Alex, be serious. You're throwing away a stable career at a respected firm to go play in your garage." "It's more than that, Isabella," he said calmly. "Is it?" she challenged. "Or are you just running away because you can't handle the fact that my family is successful and you're not?" He didn't take the bait. He saw no point in trying to convince her. Her worldview was a fortress, and he no longer had any interest in laying siege to it. "I've already found an apartment," he said. "I'll have my things moved out by the end of the week." She just shook her head, a small, bitter smile playing on her lips. "Fine. Go. Go play with your little toys, Alex. You'll be back in 6 months asking for a loan." He just looked at her. "No, I won't." He moved into a small, sparsely furnished one-bedroom apartment across town. It was a strategic move. The humble address, the simple life, it all fed the narrative she and her family had constructed for him. He was the failed artist, the man-child, the sensitive soul crushed by the real world. He let them believe it. He wanted them to believe it. Their underestimation was his greatest asset. It was the camouflage that allowed him to build his empire in plain sight, unnoticed and unopposed. While they were laughing at him, he was laying the foundations of the very building they would one day beg to enter. Almost a year passed. It was a year of 18-hour days and sleepless nights fueled by coffee and conviction. Alex's life was a study in contrasts. By day, he was the CEO of Ethelred Structures, a company that was rapidly, quietly, becoming an indispensable tool for some of the largest construction firms in the country. His software was saving them millions, preventing costly delays, and revolutionizing how they approached complex projects. He was hiring staff, expanding his office space floor by floor, and making decisions that shifted millions of dollars. He was becoming a force. But his personal life remained one of deliberate austerity. He still lived in the same small apartment. He drove a modest sedan. He dressed in the same simple, well-made but unbranded clothes. He avoided industry parties and award ceremonies, preferring to let his chief operating officer, a charismatic and media-savvy man named David Chen, be the public face of the company. Alex's name was on the founding documents and the patents, a secret held closely by his board and his most trusted employees, but it was not in the news. He was a ghost in his own machine. This self-imposed anonymity was a strategic choice. He knew the world Isabella inhabited. It was a world that read headlines, not financial reports. It judged by magazine features, not by market disruption. As long as he stayed out of the spotlight, he remained in her mind the man who had failed. The chance encounter happened on a rainy Tuesday in November. He was at a small, independent coffee shop near his old neighborhood, a place he still favored for its quiet atmosphere and excellent espresso. He was sketching an idea in his notebook, the same leather-bound one, now even more worn, when the bell above the door chimed. He glanced up, and his heart gave a familiar, painful lurch. It was Isabella. She was not alone. She was with two women who were perfect echoes of herself, impeccably dressed, exuding an aura of casual wealth and effortless superiority. They moved through the small cafe as if they owned it, their conversation a bright, sharp murmur that cut through the gentle hiss of the espresso machine. She saw him. Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second in genuine surprise before her expression settled into a mask of polite, distant pity. She led her friends toward his small table. There was no escaping it. "Alex," she said, her voice a little too loud, a little too bright. "Fancy seeing you here." He closed his notebook and stood up. "Isabella, hello." "These are my friends, Chloe and Madison," she said, gesturing vaguely. Chloe and Madison gave him brief, evaluative glances, the kind one gives to a piece of uninteresting modern art, before their eyes slid away. He was dismissed. "This is Alex," Isabella continued, and the way she said his name was an entire story in itself. It was heavy with unspoken history and condescension. "We were married." The past tense was a deliberate twist of the knife. It defined him not by who he was, but by who he had been in relation to her. A closed chapter, a footnote. "So, what are you up to these days?" she asked, Gasso, question of formality, her tone already supplying the answer she expected. Very little. He could have told her. He could have said, "My company just closed a $40 million funding round." He could have said, "We're about to sign a contract with the largest developer in the state." He could have said, "The little computer project you mocked is now valued at over $100 million. But he didn't. The time wasn't right. The revenge, when it came, needed to be absolute, and for that, he needed her to be at the peak of her arrogance. So he gave her the version of the truth she wanted to hear. "I'm still working on my startup," he said, his voice quiet and even. "A bit of tech consulting, keeping busy." Isabella seized on it, translating it for her friends with a magnanimous smile. "Alex has his own little passion project," she explained to them, as if talking about a child's lemonade stand. "A tech startup. It's so important to have a hobby, isn't it? Something to keep your mind occupied." The humiliation was exquisite. It was public. It was condescending, and it was delivered with a smile. She was painting him as a harmless, slightly pathetic hobbyist, a man adrift without her family's wealth and influence to guide him. Her friends nodded along, their expressions a perfect blend of sympathy and disinterest. Alex simply nodded. "It is important," he agreed, his calm unnerving her more than any argument would have. He picked up his coat. "Well, it was good to see you, Isabella. Ladies." He gave them a polite nod, paid for his coffee at the counter, and walked out into the rain, leaving them standing there. He didn't look back, but he could feel their eyes on him. He could almost hear their conversation as he walked away. Poor Alex, he really let himself go, didn't he? She's so much better off without him. He got into his simple car, the engine starting with a quiet hum. He sat for a moment, the rain drumming on the roof. He did not feel anger. He felt a cold, clear sense of purpose. This was the second brick in the foundation of her downfall. The first was her words. The second was her pity. He started the car and drove not to his small apartment, but to the gleaming 20-story office building where Ethelred Structures now occupied 3 full floors. As he walked through the bustling office, his employees greeting him with respect, the contrast between Isabella's perception and his reality was a chasm. She thought he was drowning in the rain. She had no idea he was the storm. Another 8 months slid by, each day a quiet victory for Alex and a slow, creeping defeat for the Rossi family. While Ethelred Structures was experiencing exponential growth, Rossi Corp was beginning to crumble. The world of business had shifted beneath Marcus Rossi's feet, and his arrogance had rendered him immobile. He had built his empire on aggressive, old-world tactics, leveraging debt, bullying competitors, and relying on his name and connections. But the industry was being reshaped by technology, data, and efficiency, the very things his company, and by extension his daughter, had dismissed as trivial. Rossi Corp, once a titan, was now a dinosaur sinking into the tar, its balance sheets bleeding red. They had made a series of disastrous investments, ignoring the market analysis that pointed to a tech-driven future, the very future Alex was building. Alex knew all of this. He didn't have to spy. The information was public, woven into the fabric of the financial news he now consumed as part of his daily routine. He watched the decline of Rossi Corp with a detached, analytical interest, like an architect studying a structurally unsound building, waiting for the inevitable collapse. He felt no pleasure in it, only a grim sense of validation. It was the natural consequence of their hubris. Their final interaction before the job application was at the wedding of a mutual acquaintance. The event was a lavish affair, a desperate performance of wealth and stability by a social circle that was beginning to feel the tremors of change. Alex had debated not going, but he knew he had to. It was another data point, another chance to observe. He saw Isabella across the grand ballroom. She wore a stunning backless gown of deep emerald green, a queen holding court, but her posture was too rigid, her laughter a little too loud. There were shadows of stress under her perfectly applied makeup. She was projecting confidence, but he could see the cracks in the facade. Eventually, she cornered him near the terrace, away from the prying eyes of the other guests. She tried to begin with her usual display of superiority. "Monaco was absolutely divine last month," she said, fanning herself lightly. "You should have seen the yachts. Daddy was thinking of upgrading." It was a clumsy, transparent lie. He knew from public shipping manifests that Marcus had recently sold his yacht to cover a margin call. Alex didn't call her on it. He simply nodded. "I'm sure it was lovely." Her pleasantries quickly evaporated, replaced by a raw, poorly concealed desperation. "Listen, Alex," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "This is a bit awkward, but I was wondering if you could help me out. Just a small loan. Things are a little tight at the moment, with Dad's company going through a restructuring." Restructuring was a generous term for circling the drain. The small loan she was asking for was $20,000. To her, it might have seemed like a trivial sum, the kind of money one finds in a winter coat pocket. To the man she believed him to be, it would have been a significant amount. This was it, the third and final act of humiliation, though this time the roles were reversed. It was no longer her insulting him or pitying him. It was her needing him. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. He could have written the check without a second thought. It would have meant nothing to his current finances, but it would have meant everything to the narrative. Giving her the money would have been an act of pity, confirming her belief that he was a soft-hearted fool she could manipulate. Refusing was an act of power. "I'm sorry, Isabella," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "I can't." Her face tightened. "You can't, or you won't. Don't tell me you don't have it, Alex. I know what architects at your level make." "It's not about that," he said, choosing his words carefully. "All of my capital is tied up in my project right now. I don't have that kind of liquidity." It was the truth, in a way. His personal wealth was inextricably linked to the value and growth of his company. Her face flushed with anger. The desperation curdled into venom. The mask of civility fell away, revealing the same ugly arrogance from that Christmas dinner. "Unbelievable," she hissed. "After everything, you're going to be this petty? This selfish? I should have known. You haven't changed at all. You're still so small." There it was, the final insult, the last stone she would ever have the chance to throw. He didn't flinch. He just looked at her, and for the first time, she might have seen a flicker of something in his eyes she didn't recognize. Not sadness, not anger, but a profound and final judgment. "I have to go," he said quietly. He turned and walked away, leaving her standing on the terrace, cloaked in her emerald gown and her rage. He didn't look back. He walked out of the ballroom, out of the wedding, and out of the last vestiges of their shared life. The trap was now perfectly set, not by him, but by her. Every insult, every dismissal, every condescending word had been a thread she had woven herself. All he had to do now was wait for her to walk into the web. The next time he saw her, it would be on his terms, in his world, in the heart of the empire she never knew he was building. The day of the final interview arrived, crisp and clear. A perfect autumn Friday. Isabella Rossi walked into the lobby of the Ethelred Structures building, feeling a potent cocktail of anxiety and exhilaration. The building itself was a masterpiece. It wasn't just tall, it was intelligent. The facade was a stunning interplay of glass and recycled steel, with vertical gardens climbing the lower floors. It was a physical manifestation of everything she had been taught to respect: power, taste, and cutting-edge success. This was not the scrappy, garage-based startup she had imagined. This was a serious corporation, a place where fortunes were made. The thought that she might soon be a part of it, a director, was a balm to her wounded pride. The lobby was a cathedral of quiet efficiency. People moved with purpose. The air hummed not with frantic energy, but with the deep, resonant thrum of a powerful engine operating at peak performance. Her heels clicked softly on the polished concrete floors as she approached the reception desk. Her initial interviews had gone exceptionally well. The HR manager had been impressed by her resume, which was admittedly strong. She had an MBA from a top school and years of experience in business development at her father's company. On paper, she was an ideal candidate. The man who would be her direct superior, a sharp-eyed VP named Jacob, had been even more enthusiastic. He saw in her the polish and connections his department needed. She had played the part perfectly, exuding confidence and strategic insight. She felt the familiar thrill of being admired, of being seen as valuable. She was sure the job was hers. After a short wait, a woman approached her. She was impeccably dressed in a simple, elegant style, her demeanor calm and professional. "Ms. Rossi, I'm Sarah Jenkins, Executive Assistant to the CEO. I'll be taking you to your final interview." Isabella's heart gave a little leap. The CEO. A personal, final round interview with the CEO for a director-level position was unusual. It meant they were serious. It meant she had made a significant impression. This was the ultimate validation. She stood a little taller, a confident smile settling on her face. "Of course. Thank you, Sarah." Sarah led her through a set of secure glass doors and into a different part of the building. The atmosphere shifted. The quiet hum of the main offices faded, replaced by an almost reverential silence. The hallway was long, paneled in a warm, dark oak. The lighting was subtle, leading the eye toward a single set of massive, unadorned doors at the far end. There was no nameplate, no title. The lack of signage was, in itself, the ultimate statement of power. Only those who were supposed to be there would know where they were going. Isabella felt a flicker of nervousness, the kind she always felt before a big meeting. It was the pleasant anxiety of a competitor before a race they knew they would win. She smoothed down her silk blouse and mentally rehearsed her key talking points, her vision for the company's strategic outreach. They reached the oak doors. Sarah stopped and turned to her. Her expression was perfectly neutral, but her eyes held a strange, watchful quality. "The CEO will see you now," she said. Sarah gave a single, soft knock on the door before pushing it open, holding it for Isabella to enter. "Ms. Rossi is here to see you," she announced into the cavernous space. Isabella stepped across the threshold, her professional smile firmly in place, ready to meet the architect of this impressive empire. The door clicked shut behind her, the sound echoing in the sudden, vast silence of the room. The office was breathtaking. It was less a room and more a slice of the sky. An entire wall was a single pane of floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a panoramic, godlike view of the city below. The furniture was sparse but exquisite, a massive desk of dark wood and steel, a few low-slung leather chairs, and nothing else. The space was defined by what it lacked. There was no clutter, no awards, no personal photos. It was the office of a mind concerned only with the essential. A man was standing with his back to her, looking out at the cityscape. He was tall and lean, dressed in a simple, dark suit that was clearly custom-tailored, but bore no ostentatious branding. The power in the room was palpable. It emanated from him, from the silence, from the sheer scale of the view. This was the man who held her future in his hands. "Thank you for seeing me," Isabella began, her voice confident. "I'm very excited about this opportunity." The man did not turn immediately. He remained still for a long moment, as if considering her words against the backdrop of the entire city. Then, slowly, he turned around. The smile on Isabella's face did not just falter, it shattered. It was a physical collapse, her facial muscles going slack with disbelief. Her mind, quick and sharp and trained for business warfare, simply stopped working. It tried to process the information, but the data was corrupt. The image did not compute. The man standing before her, the man framed by immeasurable wealth and power, the architect of this silent, formidable empire, was Alex. Her Alex. The quiet, unambitious husband she had dismissed. The man she had called replaceable. He looked different, yet exactly the same. The calmness was still there, but it was no longer the quiet of contentment she had so despised. It was the deep, unshakable calm of absolute control. The gentleness in his eyes had been replaced by a clear, analytical focus. He was not looking at her as a man looks at his estranged wife. He was looking at her as a CEO looks at a candidate. "Isabella," he said. His voice was the same, yet it was not. It was level, devoid of any emotional inflection. No triumph, no anger, no surprise. That neutrality was more terrifying than any rage could have been. He gestured to the chair opposite his colossal desk. "Please, have a seat." She remained frozen, rooted to the spot a few feet from the door. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The meticulously constructed world she inhabited, with its clear hierarchies and predictable outcomes, was dissolving around her. The floor seemed to drop away, leaving her suspended in a state of pure, horrifying vertigo. "Alex," she finally managed to whisper, the name a question, a plea. What is this? Is this some kind of sick joke?" He walked slowly from the window to his desk, his movements fluid and deliberate. He didn't sit down. He stood behind it, placing his hands on its cool, dark surface. The desk was a barrier, a fortress wall between them. "It's not a joke, Isabella," he said, his voice still unnervingly calm. "This is my company, Ethelred Structures." He picked up a folder from the desk. It was her application. He held it up slightly. "And you are here as a candidate for the position of Director of Strategic Outreach." He opened the folder and glanced down at it, as if seeing it for the first time. "Your resume is impressive." He said the word impressive with a flat, clinical detachment that stripped it of all meaning. It was not a compliment. It was an observation, a data point. The quiet bomb had been dropped. It made no sound, but the shockwave hit her with physical force. She swayed slightly, her hand coming up to her throat. This wasn't a reunion. It wasn't a confrontation between a husband and a wife. It was an assessment. And she had just walked into the room to be judged by the man she had long ago deemed worthless. The silence in the office stretched, becoming a living entity. It was filled with the unspoken history between them, with every condescending remark and every dismissive glance. Isabella's mind raced, trying to find purchase in the wreckage of her reality. Apologize, flatter, explain. Her social instincts, honed over a lifetime of navigating power dynamics, were screaming at her, but they were giving her conflicting, useless advice. How do you flatter a man you just discovered is a king, after spending years treating him like a court jester? "Alex, she started, her voice thin and reedy. "I had no idea. I swear, if I had known that this was your company." He cut her off, not with aggression, but with a simple, quiet statement that landed with the force of a gavel. "That's the point, isn't it, Isabella?" He looked at her directly then, and his eyes were clear, holding no malice, only an unnerving, analytical clarity. "You had no idea. Your respect, your admiration, it's all conditional. It's a commodity you award to people based on their perceived status. It's predicated on their net worth, their title, their proximity to the power you worship. The person themselves, their character, their ideas, they are irrelevant to you." He leaned forward slightly, his hand still resting on the desk. He was not angry. He was a professor, a lecturer, calmly laying out the points of a thesis she was the subject of. This was the moral mirror, and he was forcing her to look into it. "Let's review the data," he said, the businesslike terminology a chillingly effective choice. 2 years and 4 months ago, at your father's Christmas dinner, you told me I was replaceable. You said contentment was for the unambitious. Your exact words. You judged my worth based on my refusal to embrace your family's brand of predatory capitalism. Isabella flinched as if struck. He wasn't shouting. He was simply reporting facts, and the facts were damning. Then, he continued, his voice never wavering, approximately 1 year ago, at the Blue Leaf Cafe, you ran into me by chance. You introduced me to your friends with a pity that was louder than any insult. You dismissed my life's work, the very work that built this room and everything in it, as tinkering in a garage. You defined me as a failure to elevate your own status in front of your friends. He paused, letting the memory materialize in the space between them. She could see it, the cafe, the rain, the pitying smiles of her friends. And finally, 8 months ago, at the Langham wedding, you came to me not as an equal, but as a supplicant. You asked me for money, not because you saw me as a friend or a partner, but because you saw me as a resource to be tapped. And when I refused, you called me selfish. You called me petty. You called me small. You never once, in all that time, asked what I was building. You never showed a flicker of genuine curiosity. You only ever saw what you thought I lacked. He picked up her resume from the folder, holding the single sheet of paper between his thumb and forefinger. It looked flimsy, insignificant in his hand. And now you're here, he said, his voice dropping slightly, drawing her in. You're here because your world is collapsing. Rossi Corp is failing. And why is it failing, Isabella? It's failing because it was run with the exact same blindness, the same arrogance you have shown me for years. Your father dismissed the technological shifts in the market. He looked down on the data-driven models he didn't understand. He dismissed the very trends that Rossi Corp ignored, the trends that built this company. He placed her resume back down on the desk, aligning it perfectly with the edge. You are not here because you believe in what Ethelred Structures does. You are here because you are seeking a lifeboat. You saw a powerful, successful company, and you wanted in. The name on the door was irrelevant. The mission was irrelevant. Only the status mattered. He finally looked up from the paper and met her gaze. Am I wrong? She had no answer. Every word was true. He had dissected her, laid her motivations bare on his vast, empty desk. The confident, ambitious woman who had walked into the office was gone, replaced by a trembling, exposed fraud. The tears she had been fighting back finally began to fall, tracing silent paths through her expensive makeup. The breakdown was not performative. It was the genuine, soul-crushing collapse of a lifetime of carefully constructed certainties. The facade of the arrogant elite crumbled into dust, revealing what had been underneath all along, a desperate, terrified person whose entire sense of self-worth was externally derived and had just been declared bankrupt. Alex, please, she sobbed, the words choked and raw. I'm sorry, you're right. You're right about everything. I was a fool. I was arrogant. I was so wrong. Please, just give me a chance. I can do this job. I'll work harder than anyone. I'll prove it to you. I've changed. He listened to her pleas without interruption. His expression was not one of triumph or satisfaction. He wasn't savoring this moment. As he looked at the weeping woman before him, the woman who had been his wife, he felt a profound and weary melancholy. This was not a victory. It was a tragedy, a life wasted in the pursuit of hollow things. When she finished, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs, he let the quiet settle back into the room for a long moment before he spoke. His voice, when it came, was soft, but the finality in it was absolute. "I can't hire you, Isabella." She looked up, her tear-filled eyes wide with shock and a last desperate glimmer of hope that she had misheard him. He continued, explaining his reasoning with the same dispassionate clarity he had used for everything else. "And it's not because of our past. It's not about revenge. If you were the best candidate in a way that truly aligned with our values, I would hire you. But you're not." He gestured to the office around them, to the city beyond the glass. This company, this entire enterprise, was built on a foundation of principles that are the complete antithesis of how you operate. We succeed because we listen to the quietest voice in the room if it has a good idea. We succeed because we value collaboration over hierarchy. We succeed because we believe that a person's worth is in their contribution, not their title. Your entire philosophy, the one you have lived by your whole life, is fundamentally incompatible with our culture. You wouldn't be an asset here, Isabella. You would be a liability. He paused, letting the cold, hard business logic of his decision sink in. Then, he delivered the final, devastating blow. He wasn't cruel. He was simply closing the loop, bringing the story full circle, using her own words to pass judgment. In an environment that values humility, mutual respect, and internal validation, he said slowly, his eyes locked on hers, you would not be indispensable. In fact, in this culture, you would be replaceable. He said the word, the same word she had used to shatter him 2 years ago. But his delivery was completely different. Hers had been a weapon, sharp and cruel. His was a diagnosis, calm and clinical. It was a professional assessment, and that made it infinitely more crushing. The narrative symmetry was complete. The insult she had thrown so carelessly had come back to her, not as an echo, but as a carefully reasoned, irrefutable conclusion. But he did not end it there. To simply crush her and cast her out would have been her way of doing things. It was not his. He was offering justice, not vengeance. And justice, in his view, required an opportunity for redemption, however small. Your world has changed, Isabella, he said, his tone softening slightly. Rossi Corp is being acquired. My company is not involved, but I know the firm that is handling the acquisition. They are thorough. He let that hang in the air for a moment. They will be cleaning house. Your father, your brother, they will not survive the transition. You, with your qualifications, might be offered a standard severance package. He walked around the desk, closing some of the distance between them. He was no longer the CEO behind a fortress. He was just a man speaking to another person. But they are also offering something else, he continued. It's a new initiative, a retraining program for former executives who are willing to adapt to the new market. It's a junior position, a project management role on the ground floor. It would mean starting over. It would be humbling. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a simple, elegant business card. He held it out to her. On it was a name and a direct phone number. This is the woman in charge of that program. The choice is yours. You can take the severance, cling to your pride, and try to find another company that values the old way of doing things. Or you can take this card, make the call, and learn how to build something real from the ground up. The choice is yours, Isabella. Cling to your pride or embrace humility and start over. She stared at the card, then at his face. She had come here seeking a position of power, a validation of her worth. Instead, she was being offered a lifeline that was also a lesson. a chance to become a different person, but at the cost of everything she had ever believed herself to be. Slowly, her trembling hand reached out and took the card from him. Isabella walked out of Alex's office in a daze. The long, silent walk back down the oak-paneled hallway, the elevator ride down 57 floors, the walk across the cathedral-like lobby, it all passed in a blur. She clutched the business card in her hand like a talisman, its sharp edges digging into her palm. She didn't see the purposeful employees rushing past her. She didn't see the stunning architecture. All she saw was the wreckage of her life and the one tiny, terrifying path out of it that Alex had offered her. The weeks that followed were the most difficult of her life. Rossi Corp was dismantled with brutal efficiency. Her father and brother were unceremoniously forced into early retirement, their golden parachutes barely enough to cover their debts. Their world, the one of loud pronouncements and backroom deals, had vanished. She was adrift. For days she did nothing. She stayed in her apartment, the severance agreement on her coffee table, the business card beside it. Her pride screamed at her to tear up the card, to take the money and run, to try and salvage some remnant of her former life. But Alex's words echoed in her mind. Replaceable. He was right. In the world he had built, a world based on substance and collaboration, she was. But perhaps she didn't have to be. With a deep breath that felt like her first in years, she picked up the phone and made the call. 3 months later, Alex was in a late afternoon board meeting discussing Q4 expansion strategies. The numbers on the screen were staggering, a testament to the unstoppable momentum of his creation. As the EO meeting wrapped up, Sarah entered silently and placed a fresh cup of coffee on the table beside him. As the board members filed out, chatting amiably, Alex turned to Sarah. "Any news on the Rossi Corp integration?" he asked quietly. It was the company that had acquired her father's business. Sarah gave a small, knowing smile. "It's proceeding. The new management is effective. They've managed to salvage more of the core assets than they expected." She paused, then added, "I heard from my contact over there. The retraining program has been a success. They said one of the participants has been a real surprise, Isabella Rossi." Alex looked up, his interest piqued. "Oh?" "Apparently, the first few weeks were rough," Sarah continued. "She was completely out of her element, but she stuck with it. She's in a junior project coordinator role. She shows up early, she stays late, she listens more than she talks. They say she's actually learning." Alex was silent for a moment, processing this. He looked out his window at the sprawling city, a tapestry of millions of lives, each with their own story of failure and redemption. He felt no smugness, no sense of victory. The satisfaction he felt was of a different, more complex kind. It wasn't the satisfaction of having won, but the hope that perhaps, in the end, no one had to lose completely. The goal was never to destroy her, but to force her to see. And it seemed she was finally beginning to open her eyes. He had his justice. He had held up the mirror and shown her the truth of her own values. But he had done it without sacrificing his own. He had not become cruel or vindictive. He had remained the architect, the builder. The ultimate triumph wasn't in her downfall, but in the quiet hope of her reconstruction. He hadn't needed to become her, to beat her. He had beaten her by remaining himself, and in doing so, had given her a chance to become someone better. True worth is not found in the noise you make or the status you project, but in the strength and integrity of the foundations you build, brick by quiet brick. It is not measured by the fleeting judgment of others, but by the unwavering truth of your own character. Alex had understood a profound secret. Strength isn't about becoming indispensable to a world that has the wrong values. It's about building your own world based on the right ones and becoming indispensable to that. It's about being true, not to a title or a bank account, but to yourself. So, what do you think? Did Alex do the right thing? Should he have been more forgiving and given her the job? Or was the difficult lesson the more compassionate choice in the long run? I would genuinely love to read your thoughts and perspectives in the comments below. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you found value in this story of quiet strength and ultimate vindication, please show your support by giving it a like, and be sure to subscribe for more tales that explore the complexities of human nature and the quiet triumph of integrity. Until next time, remember to build your own foundations and build them strong.